Hello, welcome back to Enjoying the Word, and we are jumping into the second stage of the process of understanding a Bible passage. Okay, so the first stage is the look. Look and see what it says. And we did a video to summarize that. It was kind of rushed, but we skimmed through it to see what's there in the passage. The more you can spend time looking, the more accurate you'll be with your learning, okay? And it's the learning that we're coming to now to say, okay, let's spell out some detail. What does it involve to make sense of a passage? What does the text mean? Okay, this is about understanding the passage. We're trusting that God is a good communicator. I think he's a great communicator. And what that means is that any time we spend digging into a passage, trying to make sense of it, is going to yield fruit for us. Sometimes we can get a bit creative. We can come to the Bible and make it say all sorts of crazy and newfangled things. But here's the thing. No matter how clever we are, what we can make it say is not as good as what God made it say. And therefore we need to put the effort in to understand what the text means. Here are the elements of the study process. We need to wrestle with the context of the passage, the content of the passage, and the intent of the author in writing the passage. That would be true wherever we are in the Bible. But in this series, we're looking at 1 Peter chapter 2, the first 10 verses. And so let's think about the context, first of all. The context breaks into two parts. Okay, there's the historic context and the written context. Next video, we'll think about the written, what comes before, what comes after, to help us understand what we're looking at. But let's look at the historic background, the historical setting of the passage, because it's always important to have that awareness. This was not written 10 weeks ago or 10 years ago. This was written a long time ago. And so the more we can understand its setting, the historic context, the better. So 1 Peter, we're thinking about chapter 2, but the beginning of the letter gives us a little bit of information. It's written by Peter, okay, and it's written to some people, and we'll come back to that, and grace and peace, fairly standard third part of the opening. Peter, that means, if it's genuine, which it is, that this is written before Peter died. Right, it's hard to write letters after you're dead. And so Peter died, we believe, in about AD 65, something like that. So mid-60s, first century, 30-ish years after the events of the first Easter, 35 years after. Okay, so Peter now is an older man. He's not old like John becomes, for example, because Peter is executed in about 65, but he's a more seasoned, established apostle, and he's writing to some people who are elect exiles of the dispersion in these 5 places. What's going on? Well, you need to do a little bit of digging, a little bit of checking commentaries and so on. But I think what you'll find is that this is a very specific group of people. This isn't just written to a general crowd of Christians everywhere, even though a list of place names can make us think, oh, it's just general. It's people all over the place. Actually, these are some specific places, and we'll see where they are in a second. But he's writing to elect exiles of the dispersion. Here's my understanding, based on the study I've done, a little bit of reading in some good commentaries, a little bit of background awareness. The Roman Empire, right? That's the context in which this was written. The Roman Empire was expanding. And as it expanded, one of the ways it did that was to move people into new areas. Sometimes a retiring centurion, for example, could get land and represent Rome in an area. But sometimes people were moved because they were a problem. Okay, not because they were being retired or being honored, but because they were a bit of a problem. And I think that's what's going on here. So in Rome, in the city of Rome, they had over the years riots and fires and things, and the leadership wanted to establish its authority, and it would scapegoat groups of people. It's always easy, isn't it, to say, oh, blame that group. And so they would blame a group, and then they might forcibly move that group to a new location. And in this case, I think this is a group of Jewish background, the dispersion, so Jews spread out across the world, Jewish background believers, Christians, okay? And they are therefore elect, chosen by God, and they are exiled. They've been moved. So maybe there was a fire in Rome, like we read about in Acts 18, and Claudius moved some Jews to different places. Well, maybe this is that kind of situation. Maybe this is that situation. They've been moved from Rome to Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. That's not four corners of the world. That's the regions in Turkey. So Pontus, Galatia, what was the order? I forget now. Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia. So it's not kind of exclusive little zones. It's kind of this whole chunk. They've been moved, maybe cut out Pisidia. So this kind of northern and western part of Turkey, these zones, this is where they've been moved. They wouldn't want to be there particularly. They were not wanted in Rome. Now they wouldn't be particularly wanted there either. The locals would probably resent them for being moved in and maybe having some rights or whatever. So it's a difficult time, difficult season for these Christians, and Peter is writing to encourage them. And so as we look at the letter, we start to notice some of the details within the passage in light of the historic context. Peter's writing to encourage them in terms of who they are, their new life, like live your new life, not the old one. All right, there needs to be some consistency because there's something new about you. And who are they? That really is the focus here in terms of how God sees them. Okay, just like Jesus was rejected by men, but in the sight of God chosen and precious, you yourselves are also living stones, being built as a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So he's kind of connecting them to Jesus. Jesus suffered rejection and wasn't accepted, didn't feel like he belonged, but in God's eyes he was chosen and precious. And in the same way, these Christians may be struggling, may be rejected by men, but in God's eyes chosen and precious, with a mission to fulfill and a purpose for their existence, a reason for being there. And if we just drop down to the end here, we've got this final couple of verses in our section where it's more of the same, reinforcing your chosen, special, royal, holy existence, God's people, receivers of mercy from God. Peter's writing to them not just to fire some theological truths out there, but he's using these truths to communicate encouragement to them as he is offering encouragement to Christians in difficult circumstances. We're going to come back and we're going to think about the context, not just the historic context, but also the written context. That'll be the next video.